There's a moment that happens when you're trying to change something about your life. When you feel it building, that surge of clarity, that sense of this time it's different. You can see it. The version of you who follows through, who stays consistent, who finally does the thing. And for a few days, maybe a week, maybe even two, you do. You show up, you execute, you feel like you've cracked the code. And then it fades. Not all at once. It's subtler than that. You miss one day, then another. The momentum slows. The clarity clouds. And before you know it, you're back where you started. Except now you're also carrying something extra. The feeling that you failed. Again. And the question that follows is always the same. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just stay motivated? Here's what I want you to consider. Nothing is wrong with you. The problem isn't your motivation. The problem is that you've been told motivation is the answer, and it's not. This video is about why willpower and motivation keep letting you down. Not because you're weak, not because you're undisciplined, but because they were never designed to carry the weight you've been putting on them. This is about the biology of why motivation spikes and collapses, about why discipline without identity is just performance, and about why you've been blaming yourself for something that was never a personal failing. This won't tell you how to get more motivated. It won't give you a hack to summon willpower on demand, but it will help you stop treating yourself like the problem and start seeing the real structure underneath. Let's start here. Willpower is a short-term resource, not a character trait, not a muscle you build, a resource like battery life. And just like battery life, it depletes with use. Every decision you make draws from it. Every moment you resist something draws from it. Every time you override a habit, navigate conflict, choose the harder option, you're spending willpower. And when it runs out, it runs out. This isn't opinion. This is neuroscience. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for self-control, planning, decision-making, it has limits. And when it's tired, it stops functioning at full capacity. That's not a flaw in you. That's biology. So when you wake up determined and focused, and by evening you're scrolling mindlessly or eating something you said you wouldn't, or skipping the thing you're committed to, that's not failure, that's depletion. And here's the part that makes it worse. Stress accelerates that depletion. When your nervous system is activated, when you're anxious, overwhelmed, under pressure, your brain prioritizes survival, not long-term goals. It doesn't care about your 5-year plan. It cares about getting you through the next hour. And in that state, willpower becomes almost inaccessible. Which means the more stress you're under, the less capacity you have to just push through. And yet, that's exactly when you're told to dig deeper, to try harder, to prove you want it enough. But wanting isn't the issue. Capacity is. Now, let's talk about motivation. Because motivation operates on a completely different system, and it's even less reliable than willpower. Motivation spikes. It surges when something feels new, urgent, exciting, or tied to immediate reward. It floods your system with dopamine. It makes action feel effortless, and that feeling is intoxicating. It makes you believe that this is what change is supposed to feel like. But motivation doesn't sustain. It can't. Because dopamine is a response to novelty and anticipation, not to repetition. Once the newness wears off, once the goal feels distant instead of immediate, the surge fades. And when it fades, you're left with nothing. No framework, no structure, just the expectation that you should still feel that surge. And when you don't, you assume something is wrong with you. But here's the truth. If motivation worked, it would have worked by now. Think about how many times you felt motivated, how many times you've started strong, how many times you've had the clarity, the vision, the determination, and how many times it's dissolved. That's not because you didn't want it enough. It's because motivation is not a foundation. It's a spark, and sparks don't build fires on their own. They need structure. They need containment. They need something to sustain them once the initial heat dies down. Without that, you're just relighting the same match over and over, wondering why it keeps going out. Here's the third piece, and this one is important. Women are taught to blame themselves for structural problems. You're taught that if something isn't working, it's because you're not trying hard enough, not disciplined enough, not committed enough. And so when willpower fails and motivation fades, you internalize it. You make it mean something about your character. But what if the structure you're operating within was never built to support you? What if the system you're trying to succeed in assumes that you have infinite capacity, no competing demands, no emotional labor, no second shift, no ambient stress? What if the problem isn't you? It's the expectation that you should be able to function like someone whose life looks nothing like yours. Because here's what happens. You're managing a household, a career, relationships, your own nervous system, everyone else's emotions. And then you're told that if you can't also maintain perfect discipline around your habits, your health, your goals, that's a personal failure. But it's not. It's a structural impossibility dressed up as a character test. And the real damage happens when you keep trying to solve a structural problem with personal effort. When you keep pouring willpower into a system that's designed to drain it. When you keep waiting for motivation to carry you through a life that requires something much more sustainable. Because that's the fourth thing. Discipline without identity is just performance. You can white-knuckle your way through anything for a while. You can force consistency. You can override your resistance. But if the behavior isn't connected to who you are, if it's just something you're doing to prove you're capable, or to meet an external standard, or because you think you should, it won't last. Because performance is exhausting. Eventually, your system will rebel. Not because you're weak, because you're human. Real change doesn't come from forcing yourself to act like someone you're not. It comes from building a structure that aligns with who you actually are. And that structure doesn't rely on motivation. It doesn't demand constant willpower. It operates underneath those things. But you can't build that structure if you're still convinced the problem is your lack of discipline. So let's bring this together. If you've been cycling through motivation and collapse, if you've been wondering why you can't just stay consistent, it's not because you're broken. It's because you've been relying on tools that were never meant to do the job you are asking them to do. Willpower depletes, motivation fades, and neither of them can carry the weight of long-term change on their own. And you might be feeling something right now. Maybe frustration, maybe relief, maybe anger at how much time you've spent blaming yourself for something that was never your fault. That's valid, all of it. Because this isn't just about productivity or habits. This is about the story you've been telling yourself. The one that says that if you just tried harder, if you just wanted it more, everything would click. And that story, it's been keeping you stuck. Not because it's motivating, because it's punishing. And punishment doesn't create change. It creates shame. And shame doesn't build anything. It just makes you smaller. So if there's one thing to walk away with, it's this. Stop waiting for motivation to save you. Stop trying to willpower your way through a life that requires something deeper. Because there's a reason change needs containment, not pressure. There's a reason sustainable transformation doesn't feel like a surge. It feels like a structure, like clarity, like alignment. And you can't access that if you're still treating yourself like the obstacle. You don't need to figure this out today. You don't need to have a new plan. You don't need to try harder or dig deeper or find a way to manufacture more willpower. You just need to stop believing that the problem is you, because it's not. It never was. The system failed you, not the other way around. And when you're ready, when you stop trying to force your way through and start building something that actually fits, that's when things shift.